So Carolyn said that it's time to quit living off grid. One of the things that will end an adventure or your dream is your inability to take care of your wife or to make life convenient for your wife. This is no complaint towards Carolyn. I want to be clear about this. This is getting to a point so we all can live our dreams. When Carolyn and I decided we wanted to travel, we got a pop-up camper. Now, Carolyn and I discuss everything. We got the camper. It was an old camper. It was like a 1970s Coleman camper, so it needed a lot of work. And I immediately started doing things to it, making things what I thought was pretty simple. Carolyn has never dealt with DC electric. You plug something into the wall and it works. Well, with DC, switches are different and different things, and I was making it all kind of neat and fancy, and I bought lighted switches. They light up, little LED switches. You can buy them for your car, and water pump in the shower, and I tried to work everything out. So we went on our test run. The first place we went to, I think, was Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was Georgia. We stayed there 3 or 4 days, and we had a shower. And now the shower was a little bit inconvenient. We had to heat up a big deal thing of water over a fire. Now we could use it over the cook stove, or we could build a fire, whatever it was. And so you only got 5 gallons of hot water. That was it. That's all you got. And we had to be careful that we didn't get it too hot. You only got one temperature, and that was whatever temperature you took it off the fire. So if you got it too hot, you really had to make sure that it wasn't too hot with your hand, and then you added cold water, and it was inconvenient to say the least. Well, we made a shower inside the camper with a black tub and a drain and the whole thing, and probably should have tested this before we went on our test run, but she used it and I used it. It was terrible. So it was a good thing that we did a test run. I think we bought a shower tent. I think we decided we were going to establish a tent next to our camper. We shower in that, but we still had to heat the water. This was when we were actually at Nomads. It was stressful. So we left, I think, in May, and in October we made it down to Florida. And Dad gave us a water heater. That changed everything. It was a on-demand water heater, used propane. It's a camping water heater. We still use it today. We still have the one Dad gave us. It works too. We thought it failed on us, but it was actually the water pump. So it's up in the attic on standby in case this one ever goes out. Now that made life a lot easier, but you still only got 5 gallons of water because our pump was hooked up to a bucket. And as Nomads, we only have 40 gallons of water every 2 weeks anyways. That's all the truck could hold. And so we had to do our laundry, we had to do our showers and drinking water and everything with this 40 gallons. It was tough. Shower days were very stressful for everybody. It was a big event. Now Carolyn likes to be able to take a shower whenever she wants to take a shower. But as Nomads, we had to take showers when we could get the water heater to work, or we got the pan to heat up, and it was just always an inconvenience. I could tell that Carolyn, after a while, was just getting tired of doing it. It was more than she could handle. And it was tough for me too. I mean, don't get me wrong, I hated looking for water all the time, and I hated looking for internet connectivity. Always inconvenient. Everything was inconvenient. The other thing that Carolyn struggled with is, of course, she's got social anxiety. Now, this is something that I couldn't control. I might have been able to control all those other things. I just didn't know how, whatever. But the social anxiety and running into people and people always wanting to talk to me, of course, being on YouTube made things worse, because if somebody knew us at a campsite, oh boy, they'd run right over. And that Carolyn was always stressed that somebody was going to come knocking on the door. We watched one YouTube video of this woman who was a nomad, and a fan saw her vehicle, come over to her vehicle, opened up her door, and said hi to this YouTuber, nomad. And Carolyn saw that and she thought, my goodness, what if somebody did that to us? So after a few years of traveling the country and dealing with stress, Carolyn and I decided it was time to quit. Everything was inconvenient as a nomad. It just seemed like you're always fighting things that shouldn't be fought. Taking a shower, eating, looking for internet, looking for water. These things should just be there. They should be there and convenient. Carolyn and I decided we were going to quit living as nomads, and we were going to buy a piece of property, build this little tiny house, and live off grid. We liked the off grid part. But the key to this was it has to be convenient. We don't want to have to work for things. The one thing I knew that Carolyn absolutely hated was having a limited amount of hot water. She wanted to be able to have as much water as she wanted anytime. Now, Carolyn doesn't use a lot of water. She is really picky about water. She reuses water for everything. For example, she is the one that came up with the idea that when she gets done with laundry, that the water in the laundry tub goes inside the house. So I carry it in by buckets and we use that water to flush our toilet. So we have a well here and I try to make water as convenient as possible for her. So we have this tank, 275 gallon IBC tank. It's inside this box. We pump water in with a little RV pump into the house. I've told you this a million times. When we use 50 gallons of water, it takes about 5 days for us to use 50 gallons. I fill it up. That way, if the well breaks or the generator breaks or I can't get the well to work or whatever the problem is, that we still have plenty of water. On the day I fill it up and I think, oh my goodness, the well's broke. It gets me time to fix it, or it gets me time to go down to the spring and get water. I can get water out of that natural spring. Carolyn doesn't have high expectations, and that's just great. It's the best relationship I've ever been in. We do not fight at all. But people will complain in the comment section that I mistreat Carolyn all the time, and I make videos like this all the time. But one of the big complaints is that she has to cook outside. I wanted to put the kitchen inside the house. She didn't, because when we were in the camper, the cook stove was in the camper and the walls got stained up and it was nasty and it smelled all the time. And if she burned something like popcorn, that would linger in there and make your eyes burn because it was a small space. Well, she didn't want to have that problem here. It does get a little chilly outside and sometimes I feel bad for her, but she never complains. I mean, she'll make a joke like, boy, the kitchen's getting a little drafty. I mean, those kind of jokes, it's funny. I do recognize we live in a tiny house. Things do become inconvenient really quick if things are going to become inconvenient. One of the biggest things we struggle with is the transition from summer to winter. We struggle with that quite a bit because we have to rearrange the house. Firewood has to come in. So all summer, you tend to throw things on top of the wood stove, a pan, or it becomes a storage spot. Well, in the wintertime, it can't be a storage spot because you're going to use it. You got to reorganize the place. And she's really good about doing that. I mean, the other time it's pretty stressful is transitioning from winter to spring, because every year we have raised chickens and we have to raise the chickens in the house because it's so cold outside that you can't. So we have these 2 crates that we got to shove into the tiny house here. And so she's got to rearrange all that. Now, of course, there's some stress, but the stress is pretty minor with these transitions. And then it goes away. You get used to it. Everything gets accommodated, and then you live 3 months without any stress. That changes in routines, living off grid, is pretty stressful because you got to adapt to it. You got to figure out your routine, and everything gets messed up. For example, we've had this little apartment size, well, it's a dorm size refrigerator. I've showed it to you many times. It's got a freezer, a fully functional freezer on top, and a refrigerator. It looks just like a refrigerator, works just like a refrigerator, but a quarter the size of a refrigerator. Now, of course, we had that as nomads. We traveled with that in the back of the truck, and we got used to using it. We got to the point where we could pack 30 pounds of meat in this little bitty freezer. And she takes ground meat, smashes it real flat in a Ziploc bag, and puts it in the refrigerator like a bookshelf. And you get 30 packages just in there as tight as you can get it. Now, if you're not careful, you pack that in there too tight, it freezes, expands, and then you can't get it out of the freezer. And boy, that is a frustrating day when you're wanting to get something out of the freezer so you can cook something, and you got to spend an hour trying to get it out. Well, I have to be aware, oops, there's a problem, because I don't want to add stress to Carolyn. I want to make her life as convenient as possible, as convenient as she wants it. For example, she does laundry by hand. If she wanted a wash machine, she would get a wash machine. It's just that simple. The other day, that refrigerant went out. Side note, it didn't actually go out. We thought it did. It hadn't worked for like 2 or 3 hours. It was not turning on. Well, we went and got a freezer, and then a day later, I plugged it in just to see if it, I don't know if it would start. I don't know why. I just plugged it in to see if it would work. And it started right up. Right now, we don't have enough solar panels to run the fridge and the freezer. And I explained all that in a previous video. So we thought it went out. So we went out to get another fridge. And while we were out, Carolyn says, I want a freezer. And I told you this whole story that I was like, why? Why do you want a freezer? I mean, I understood why she wanted a freezer, but we also need a fridge. And she said, no, we can use a cooler. And so we have been. We've been using this cooler. There's the kitty. Everybody likes the kitty. We froze some water bottles. Of course, we haven't had to use the water bottles yet because it's been so cold outside. This is not a huge inconvenience. I mean, this is basically where Carolyn's kitchen is. She walks over, gets her eggs, goes over to the stove and cooks them up. The problem is the chicken eggs. Now, the chicken eggs could be left out of the fridge. They're farm fresh eggs, and as long as it's got that coating on it, you don't wash the coating off, eggs will stay fresh for at least a month outside the refrigerator. In Europe, they don't even refrigerate them from the store. The only reason we refrigerate our eggs is because we have a rooster. And the house can get hot enough that the eggs could start to incubate. So we refrigerate them. But we don't have to. It's actually just an over precaution is all it is. I have to be aware of things. And this morning I wasn't aware of things. I did not know it was going to get as cold last night as it did. I don't think it said on my app that it was going to get this cold. I thought it was going to get down into the 20s, which is fine, which means the cooler would not have froze in the 20s, not overnight. I mean, it's 40 degrees right now. It's not too bad. But last night it got down to 14 degrees and the eggs froze. And so now she is inconvenienced and stressed. And these things trigger me, trigger you, trigger everybody. So if I would have paid attention this morning and thought, you know, those things in it probably could freeze, I could have brought them in way before she cooked breakfast. And we wouldn't have had any stresses. Now, we're not really gonna quit. She just had to get through the moment. You know, she was frustrated. But you want to keep those frustrations down when you're living your dream. Otherwise, it's not a dream. It's just one big frustration like it was when we were camping. So we've decided what we're going to do is we're going to take the eggs out of the cooler. We can freeze the cheeses into sizes, into bags big enough for a meal. We can freeze all that, take it out just like we're going to take out a meat and let it thaw out for the day. And the eggs can go underneath a bed. They'll stay cool enough that they won't incubate. We don't have to have them in a cooler. We don't. So be aware when things aren't working and make adjustments quickly. You don't want somebody to continuously be stressed like we were in the camper. So if you'll click this up next box, take you to a video where I was talking about how to live your dream. I hope I can inspire you to minimize the confusion so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.